Right, hello everybody and welcome to this evening's meeting of the City of York Council's Audit and Governance Committee. My name's Councillor Hollier. I'll be chairing the meeting. As usual, we're joined by the committee down the sides of the tables, and we've a whole panoply of various officers and council workers joining us through the evening. So I think if you could just, when you first speak, if you just give your name and title just for the webcast, that would be useful. But otherwise, I do think we all probably know who we are, don't we? Yes. Okay, move on then to apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Coles, who's been substituted by Councillor Taylor. So welcome this evening. And we've got apologies from Councillor Binney as well. So any declarations of interest? No? Okay. As usual, there's an item regarding the exclusion of press and public. So annexes 2 to 4 of agenda item 16 for the usual reasons. Are we all happy to go into private session for those items? Yep. Okay. There is no public participation. So if we move on then to the minutes and action log. If anybody has any comments or issues with them. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I mean, only one small matter arising from the minutes is that there's a lot of work plan stuff in the minutes, and they aren't on the work plan draft we have later on, but I'll bring that up at the time. In terms of action log, I emailed these over ahead of time, but it marks it as completed log, but it's not actually the completed log, it's the in progress log. 6 of the items on the action plan don't have an end date or have an end date in the past. And it's something that comes up regularly. It'd be good if we could identify a way of making sure we have something on there if officers aren't getting back to us timely. There's a couple of months between meetings, so if there's a way of putting a date on there and checking whether the end date is on there. Item 84 is due to end this month. It says to be completed when all cases are 100% and exit come from 60% at the time that the action was updated. I don't know if we're on 100% or on 61%. It'd be good if we could confirm whether that is closing this month or not. And I raised it offline, a separate email trail, but action log item 105 says the Constitution Working Group was going to have a July meeting, but it's not having a July meeting at this point in time. I don't think it changes the rest of that action, but just noting it.
Okay, if any relevant amendments can be made, and if we can try and get some dates in as well, that'd be useful. Any other issues? No. Okay. I'll sign the minutes then. Move on then to item 6, which is the information governance team report. And I will just say as well for everybody that we've got a 500-page agenda, so I think if we can assume people have read the reports and we sort of focus more on any particularly key things that need drawing out or anything that's sort of changed from the report, that'd be useful across all the reports we're getting today. Much appreciated, I think, to try and help speed us through a little bit. So thank you.
Good evening. It is now. Thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Lorraine Lunt. I'm the Information Governance Manager and Data Protection Officer for the Council. I will amend my sign later. Just to give you a few highlights out of the Information Governance Report. So we're continuing to maintain the significant improvement in the response times of FOIA and EIR requests and also subject access requests to records. We're maintaining the 95% in time being responded to in the statutory timescale, and we're up to 85% of DSARs being responded to in time, and that's given the nature of the rise in complexity, etc., of data subject access requests to records. So that's a significant and robust continuous improvement. There has been 2 decision notices that the Information Commissioner's Office has put up on their public website since the last report to committee. One was not upheld and the other one was a mixture of upheld, not upheld, partially upheld, etc. But it maintains the decisions not being upheld by the Information Commissioner in respect of the complainant's cases raised with them. So we continue to manage and maintain the appropriate use of exemptions, etc., as we go forward and respond to FOIs and EIRs. Just to note on the Local Government Transparency Code, we continue to publish our compliance with that on the York Open Data platform. We've maintained our standards met for the NHS Data Security and Protection Toolkit, again as a council, for another year running. That ensures that we can continue to maintain access and use of NHS System 1 and NHS patient level data. The advent and the introduction of the Data Use and Access Act made it compulsory and a requirement for organisations to take forward and investigate data protection complaints. We have always done them through the rights of individuals to raise a concern about how we're using their data, how they may want information rectified and or erasures or to be forgotten. So what we have done to ensure that we are compliant with all the accessibility and access requirements of the DUAA, we have put an online form to raise a data protection complaint direct into the information governance team going forward. But we were already managing and doing complaints under data protection legislation before the DUA became enforceable. A good news story that in working with partnership with North Yorkshire Police and maintaining access to their NICE Investigate system, we're now able to comply with evidence handling routes and also download information that they are lawfully entitled to under CCTV footage requests much quicker, and it saves them some time coming into the office to come in and pick them up, etc. The North Yorkshire Police Chief Inspector did put out a public statement on it, and it was just that to continue that improved approach enables faster, more efficient access to vital evidence by the police, which in turn benefits our residents and our communities. You will be aware that there was a reportable breach to the ICO. This was where we became aware that a newsletter update sent out by email had failed to be used at the BCC, so the blind copy, carbon copy. This meant that the recipients of that one email could see and others' email addresses. We immediately started the investigation and took forward our breach management process and policies. We notified it to the ICO after we did the assessment that it met the threshold for notifying to the ICO. And we did that on the 2nd of June. And on the 3rd of June, the ICO responded to our report notification and the evidence that we supplied to say that they'd closed the case and determined that there was no further action necessary by them on this occasion. And that's me. Open to any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I mean, there's obviously an improvement journey going on here, and that's to be welcomed. I guess what I'd like to know is, I mean, look, just looking at this, you get a sense as to how busy your team will be. I mean, that's probably an understatement. So I'm wondering, while there are improvements occurring, do you feel like the team has enough capacity to think about how they can improve even more? Because sometimes in the workplace, you have to stop and create the time to think, how can we do these processes better? Do you have the opportunity in a working week or a working month, or is it just thick and fast all the time, responding to what's coming in as quickly as you can and almost hoping for the best, for want of a better phrase?
My team is small, however, we are supported ably across the council from different service areas in making sure responses are collated and sent out within the timescale. And in that work that we've done across all the different service areas, that's why we've continued to maintain that improved in-time performance. The caseload is always increasing. That's not a bad thing. It means that we're being proactive, open and transparent with how people can get information, how they can ask about their rights, etc., and have those rights investigated and put right, to excuse the pun, if there is a concern there that we need to address. The work of the team through what's called the review process on looking at requests can identify where we can change something or make an improvement. So the ongoing work that the team members do under the review process, as I say, does identify those maybe quick wins, maybe themes that we can act on and look to work with the likes of business intelligence, ICT, the transformation programme, and obviously my management structure to look at how and what may need to be changed or tweaked in some way. Because sometimes if you're doing it and looking at it every day, you sometimes miss the small wins that can happen. As I say, the caseload, the workload, the areas and topics that the team are covering, such as covert, RIPA, CHIS, records management, as well as all of the FOIs, EIRs, etc. It is challenging, I won't say it isn't, but we do have time to look through the review process and with the other work that's ongoing with managers to identify improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rose?
Yeah, thank you very much for the report and thank you for all the improvement work that's going on. It is hard to find the time for it, so it is appreciated. I've some thoughts that aren't on the report, but York Open Data is getting a little bit more difficult than it was a couple of years ago to use in a couple of areas, particularly with older data that it's quite hard to spot is old and stuff. So I'll take that offline with you and catch up separately. A few specific points. The page 28, paragraph 30 bit around the reported breach. I mean, a thorough investigation was undertaken to fully understand what happened. I mean, someone didn't use BCC. That's what happened. But the ongoing program of work to review processes, systems, etc. There were really only two things that are actions from it. One is people not using BCC but still emailing it in a situation where they're just having to remember to use the right box or whatever. The other one is using systems that don't allow you to enter email addresses and don't have it coming from people through email. So I just wanted to get your take on how close are we to eliminating the need for officers to ever send an email in that way rather than just using a system to do it?
I can assure you it was a thorough investigation. It has to be for the amount of evidence I have to provide to the ICO when I'm reporting a potential or actual breach, especially within the 72 hours timescale that they give you. So we did look at the nature of why it was sent out by BCC, what other topics and or systems, etc. there are, because we do have a system in the council where we send some of the signed up to subscribe to email updates. If you look on the website, you can sign up to and subscribe to all different types of updates across council. What we're doing is we've set up a task and finish group with myself, colleagues from ICT, the communications team, etc., and looking at what the system currently does, what we've got capacity in the system to do. And we're also going back to the supplier of that system to ask how we can push out to more users within the council. So hopefully we can move newsletter, email, update, subscribe to type things off of the reliance on BCC and into a system-led provision and managing all the subscribe tos, withdrawals, consents, etc. as well. So yes, it's in progress, and we're hoping to give a report up to our senior management team on what the options are and our costs are and what the implications are. But there's lots of these across the council, so we're gathering that information first, asking everybody to tell us what do you send, when do you send it, how frequently you send it, so that we can then work out how we can move and transition people over to a system-led process.
Thanks, that's really useful. I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't a proper investigation, and obviously it's still a major breach, even though it is easily done for people to put things in CCs and a BCC or whatever. But it's good to hear. I guess the other thing that is worth looking into is whether there's a way in our IT systems of catching outbound email that have more than 5 external email addresses BCC'd or something like that. So I'll leave that with you in the task group. If I'm okay to continue asking a couple of questions. On page 33, I'll scroll to it myself. We've got the Annex 1 data tables. I just want to understand on that page and the following page, there are a number of areas where it says, for example, number of FOI reviews received is 31 last year. Further down, EIR total requests received 769, and then the not upheld or upheld are all zeros, and I would have expected them to be roughly adding up. What am I missing on that? What category are they in if they're not upheld or not upheld? If they're requests received?
So on page 34, where they are shown as zeros, it's because we've had to do a bit of case configuration work. We've only just started to pull we've recorded this information, but we're just starting to work with business intelligence to pull this information out and put it into a report and style format. So it's my apologies. I should have put an annex, a note on to say why these were shown as zeros. It should have been not recorded at the moment and not available for. But that's the reason. It's not that they weren't upheld or pursued, etc. It was just, it's a failure of mine to not annotate this report to explain it to you.
It's nice to know it's not that I was spotting it correctly and not misunderstanding what was there. I guess just commenting on the data, the increase in number of FOIs is sizable, but the performance is still really good. So thank you for somehow maintaining that. But we still have the SARs on 85% of the time, and the EIRs have dropped from 100% to 80% over the couple of years. So I guess how can we be assured that it will be increasing next year for both EIRs and SARs?
So we choose to split the request for information asked under either FOI or EIR and give you those figures separately. The ICO only looks at the combined total, and they give you a stretch target of 95% in time performance. So we will be doing the same as what we do with all the cases, is continue to look at why is there a dip in the EIRs particularly. Usually that's because if there's big projects going on and there are environmental information requests, they can be fairly complex to pull all the different information together. But it is the combined figure, but we will be continuing to work and identify where there might be themes in the EIR processes. For data subject access requests to records, the council achieves an amazing in-time performance, being at 85%, in my opinion, but also if you look at other published reports and in-time figures. Bear in mind, we were down at 50-something, 58%, etc. It's been a significant piece of work across the council to put that effort in to do it. There is no stretch target as such from the ICO on DSAR in time. I suspect that may change when they change over to the Information Commission and have the Chief Executive in post, or it changes from the ICO to the Information Commission, and they will look to change their data sets, etc. It would be very difficult to continue to improve much past 85%, just because of the nature of the complexity of SAR requests, whether it be from child social care records, adults, looked after children care experienced, but also staff requests as well. So we will continue to look at areas and ways we can improve that in-time performance. Of course we will. However, the 85% is probably what the ICO would be asking us to achieve anyway.
So just jumping in there, on that 15%, just to give it a bit of context, what sort of additional time frame are we talking about? Is it a couple of weeks that the people aren't getting information for? Is it months? Is it years? What does that kind of look like?
So within the legislation, we are allowed to apply an extension of up to a further 2 months. We do still have some, especially where we have to collate paper records held in storage, in long-term storage and or at the archivists. We keep an eye on that going over time, and we keep the requester up to date on progress, and we release bundles as they're ready and available so that they're not waiting on everything all at once. The other bit about that is that we're reporting those answered in time within the 1 month, the 1 calendar month timescale. I'm still waiting on the emphasis back from the ICO on whether where we legally and can apply an extension of up to the 2 further months, are they recorded as still out of time because they're outside of the 1 month but still within the extended 2 months. So there might be a change in a figure once we get that response and clarity on how we calculate the in time.
Okay. I'm going to Councillor Bassey and
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 small sets of questions relating to paragraph 7 and paragraph 16. So the first 2 questions are for paragraph 7. So the paragraph says that the increase in FOI, EIR and DSAR is to be understood as a positive indicator of public awareness and engagement, rather than a reflection of reduced openness or gaps in transparency. What evidence is there to suggest that?
So we publish lots of data sets on York Open Data. We comply with the Local Government Transparency Code. We comply with the ICO's publication scheme requirements. We also publish a list of previous FOIs and EIRs responded to, and we continue to work across different teams in the council to proactively publish. Even if you were to publish everything on the end of the day, you would still get the FOI requests and or the EIR requests, and it's because people want to ask for something in a certain way. They may not have looked to see what's already available, and they know that by asking it through the lawful request process, they will get the direct link to where it is and the support and the advice as part of the answer on how to filter, how to find it to exactly what they want. It's based on also information from different network groups, etc. on just, there is an increase across the piece on all types of information requests. So it also includes the requests for information that we get from other organisations, such as the police, HMRC, digital investigations, etc. So it is an increase across all of those, not just in the particular FOI and EIR. So that's what those figures represent.
Okay, so it's an inference that it's a positive thing, rather than there having been an exploration to establish whether people are doing it positively or not, if I've understood you correctly. My other question is just, which will come up later as well in this evening, I think. I'd just like to know if AI is used in researching responses to these requests, so that when requests come in, are officers going themselves to find the answer, or are chat box, etc., being used to find answers?
So there's certainly an increase in AI being used to make requests, because sometimes AI will get it wrong and quote wrong bits of legislation, etc. Where the council approves the use of AI through its AI policies and the AI tools it's allowed, if staff do that and use that to help them locate and file their response, my understanding is that most service areas will be looking to retrieve the information that they hold in that recorded format. And my understanding of the current capabilities of AI within the council is that it can't search within the CYC secure network as such. So AI may be used to support staff in the approved ways that is across the council, and for the response and the cover and response that has to go out for FOIs and EIRs, that's a template that my team produced for them, and they use that as a guide to make sure they're doing a legally compliant response each time, and they add in their responses. I'm not sure if that answers your question totally.
Sort of. I think what you're saying is that human beings have to, well, make sure I've understood you. You're saying that human beings have to double check anything that's found out, that by and large, they're not allowed to use AI, I think you've said, within the secure network. But whatever they do, human beings are intervening and making sure the data is correct.
Sorry if I've misled committee. There is an approved set of AI tools used within the council and approved uses of how and guidance, etc., for staff to do that. What I am saying is that there is always human intervention in all FOI and EIR requests, because somebody does have to complete the cover and response, do the search terms, and make sure that they've responded to the FOI and EIR fully.
Okay, thank you.
If I can, perhaps just for some clarity for members, there are two different ways that you can deal with FOIs within a council. You can either have a team that receives all the information, prepares the response and sends it out, or you can have a team that coordinates responses and makes sure that they are sent, but that those responses are prepared by the services. So, as I understand it, Lorraine's team do not use AI to prepare the responses. I can see the distaste on Lorraine's face at the concept. The teams out in the various service departments may be using AI within the confines of the council's adopted policy, but that's not the same as the council using AI to search for things and to send responses out. Does that help?
Okay, Councillor Burton.
Okay, thank you for your report, and thank you for the improvements as well that we've noted over the years. It was just actually a comment and a request for perhaps a glossary of the acronyms in the report, either at the beginning or somewhere, because not all of the acronyms are explained with brackets when they're first used, just for people who are reading the report. I know it's very easy to miss them, especially when you're dealing with them all the time, but some of them are a bit not as obvious as others. Thank you.
Of course, I'll take that way, and apologies if I've missed any. And I do put the list of abbreviations, but if I've missed some, I will make sure and double check that
All
for
right, well,
next one it's
I
there.
missed that myself, so, but thank you.
Page 31, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, and it's me.
Sorry, it relates to paragraph 16 on page 25. So I just wanted clarification as to what specific policies the council has to govern and manage all aspects of covert surveillance and CCTV, where and when they were approved, and whether or not these policies are available to be read by the public. In other words, I'm trying to find out who decides what the city council can and cannot film, and the rights of citizens to know what is being done. Who balances that? What policy informs that?
So Audit, this committee does get annual feedback following the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, so another acronym, but the IPCO is the regulator. So similar to the ICO is the Commissioner and the regulator for all things data protection FOI. There's the IPCO that covers all the council's use of covert surveillance powers. So that's through the RIPA legislation and or the CHIS and its directed covert surveillance. You have to do an application, you then have to do an authorisation, and then it always has to go in front of a magistrate for an approval to conduct the directed covert surveillance. We do have a covert surveillance policy covering RIPA, non-RIPA RIPAs, CHIS. So sorry, CHIS is the use of covert human intelligence sources. And it is a very regulated, highly regulated set of processes in place and double checks, etc. My team oversee the trained officers across the council who have the application requirements. It is then a different trained officer that then has to do the authorisation of the application. It then is set in front of the magistrate. So it's a very regulated, very strictly controlled and managed process. As I say, the reports come to this committee on the use of covert powers across the council. And the last one was not that long ago, 2 reports ago, and because of the nature of those cases, it's done at the exclusion of press and public.
So if I've understood you correctly, it's national legislation rather than decided here. In terms of CCTV, which is much more just the cameras in all our streets, is that decided here? And is there a policy governing that?
So the use of CCTV in the public space is determined by both data protection, the protection of freedoms of individuals legislation, which is all nationally set legislation. We then have to ensure that we've done data protection impact assessments and privacy and intrusion risk assessments if we're looking at an additional site for a new location for a CCTV camera in the public space. And then there's a process that goes through to within the council if it's done to be council provided equipment and managed and monitored. At the present time, we have a contracted provider who does our CCTV equipment and maintenance and also our management and monitoring. And with the statutory role of senior responsible officer being Bryn, and I report into Bryn through that route, all things CCTV as well. I.e. the use of it, the requests of information that they get for footage, and making sure that the signage and the notices, so we have to do privacy notices and signage where we put up CCTV and what it's used for are all lawful and compliant.
Okay, and so just to make sure I've understood, if that's all right, Chair. So again, you're saying that it's not decided politically, it's not an executive decision as to balancing the rights to collect data and human rights and liberties, that decision is being done on national legislation and by officers and not by politicians in York.
So there are requests that come into the CCTV service from both councillors, ward councillors, through the police, through groups such as Pub Watch and or the community safety groups and partnerships, etc. And it's only on the provision of a business case and then making sure that the data protection and privacy, human rights, etc., rights and freedoms of individuals, etc., are all covered before a decision is made on whether that new or existing CCTV in the public space would be put in place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can't see any further questions, so thank you very much for your time. Thank you. We'll move on then to item 7, which is the key corporate risks monitor for monitor 1 2026 2027. I believe this is Debbie's. Oh, David.
David's going to present the item, and we've got Sarah and Martin here because the focused risk is around safeguarding, so they're here as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. I'm David Walker, Head of Customer and Exchequer Services. This is the Risk Monitor 1 report for 2026-27. There remains 11 key corporate risks as set out in detail at Annex A and in summary at paragraph 11 within the paper. The overall risk score remains relatively static. The risks are all high, with perhaps not surprisingly financial pressures being the highest ranking risk within the register. We still continue to attend DMTs on a quarterly basis. The risk manager does that to discuss the risks with the owners and identify controls and actions and any changes in the risk, which of course feed into the quarterly reports. The reviews always provide that opportunity, and the changes in controls and actions are set out at paragraph 15 in this paper. There are quite a few in this paper compared with Monitor 4. They all revolve around key areas such as IT security, which again was in the Monitor 4 report, the Boundary Commission review, and around partnerships. As always, because the key corporate risk owners aren't always here, we review one key corporate risk each quarter. And so with risk monitor 1, it's key corporate risk 5, which is safeguarding. And both Martin and Sarah are here tonight to answer any questions around key corporate risk 5. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask if there's any questions on the main section of the corporate risks before we move on to the specific risk portfolio. Councillor Rowan?
Yeah, I mean, first it's having it's a great report. I think it's the best I've seen in terms of detail. I don't know if that's because more controls are being put in place, more actions going on, or it's just more details included. But really useful to see all those amended and additional controls. Not sure if you can answer this, but page 45 at the bottom, there's a new control around cyber essentials. Just questioning whether we're also seeking cyber essentials plus and/or ISO 27K.
As I would say, those controls come from the risk owners.
Yeah.
What I would say is, and I think it reflects the amount of work that's going on in terms of making sure that the quarterly sessions with the risk owners and with the MTs actually explores the risks, and you can see the engagement. And I think that the reason there's a number of changes is because that's got better, and therefore things are feeding through and people are considering the risk better. But in terms of those details of those controls, it's the risk owners who could answer those and not myself.
Sorry, did you want to know about what was your question? Sorry, about.
Yeah, so it mentioned Cyber Essentials accreditation, whether we're going for Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus. And also we don't mention ISO 27K, as I was just curious to know.
Oh, right, no, because it's a risk report, so it's not a detailed technical report about, but we have been accredited for Cyber Essentials. I don't know whether it's Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus. I would have to go in.
I think it's just Cyber Essentials. I don't know whether they want to do the higher one. That's what I'm saying. I couldn't answer. I can certainly ask.
Yeah.
I can take that away.
Yeah, that's it. And ditto for the first paragraph on page 46 that talks about the kind of 4 lines of defence model in not those terms, but it doesn't say what specifically we're doing. It just says we're going to improve things, but we already have that in place. So it'd be good to know what we're improving. Again, that's an offline one probably. But,
yeah. Okay.
My only other question was at the bottom of page 47 in KCR 7, it mentions a review of major capital projects governance to be undertaken. I was just wondering if we knew what the sort of timeframes of capital projects governance review might be.
Yeah, it's about done. We've got a new capital PMO that's been created, and we've got a permanent officer who's been appointed who starts mid-August. So it's kind of about there.
Any further questions?
Just one question for me. So, and it might be more for Bryn, but when I sort of step back and look at all those kind of key corporate risks, obviously cyber is a really key one that we just kind of talked about. I was slightly surprised that wasn't an individual key corporate risk by itself, given the kind of wider implications. But there's a lot of it within the KCRT, which is kind of governance. So is it just that is kind of maybe slightly misleadingly titled, or do we need to kind of consider maybe splitting that out?
The reality is behind or below the key corporate risks are individual directorate risks. So there's a raft of risks around IT. And so some of that information is picked up in there in the more detailed risk register rather than in the key corporate risk, because they're more summary of the key issues that's coming through. So we don't have it as a separate key corporate risk. It's just, as you say, picked up in the governance risk. The problem is it's the same with some of the other risks. It could be split out into more, but then you've got more key corporate risks. And best practice say as well, you can only concentrate, say, for as a CMT or even an NJ on 10, 11 risks. Any more than that, it starts to get difficult to manage them because there's so many. So it's giving you the indication, it's giving you the controls. But so the answer is, I wouldn't, because I don't think you need to. Because here you're giving assurance that that key corporate risk in itself is being managed. But equally, the directorate has their own risk registers, which they're in there. So, we could bring that section if you wanted to look at it. You could see what was in there to see what they're managing. But theoretically, if anything gets serious enough, it would be escalated anyway. So you would see it in the governance risk.
Cool, thank you. And just is that sort of consistent with how other councils do it, or is?
Every council will take a slightly different approach. What I would say is nearly every council takes the approach in terms of it's a red, amber, green. It's not a science. It's a kind of, you know, it reflects the risk. And when you talk to other authorities, the risks are almost similar. So, you know, financial pressures, capital program type risks, safeguarding, everything. They kind of pretty much reflected, but we don't agree across every authority that these are the key corporate risks, because it will differ from authority to authority. And I hate to say it, but some authorities will be in a better financial position than the City of York Council, so that might not be their key risk. And that's an area is we need to concentrate on that they don't.
That's Rose.
Just to give you the information, since you weren't on the committee at the time, but it used to be split out, and it was merged against the wishes of this committee because the people in charge of the risk register felt that it was more appropriate to put it as one item rather than two. But we have had this conversation. I can't remember when, but there'll be a lot of detail and some conversation in the past about it.
Thank you, Chair. It relates to the same issue broadly. We are on page 52. When you said the main part of the report? We're okay there. So I wanted to go back to this question of AI. And I understand it's a very broad brush term. But I'm surprised that in the risk manager register, it doesn't have its own category. For a variety of reasons, how data is used, how it's transmitted to other people, to residents, the risks of complex systems that are inevitably licensed and foreign owned. There's a lot about those kind of big risks in this report, and I welcome that, but not on the issue of AI. And I worry about whether these systems could in the future be used to surveil us, or threats of withdrawal of access, or huge increases in licensing fees. I'm aware, for example, that I think, if I've got it correct, this council pays over £500,000 a year in licensing fees to Microsoft. If we become dependent on AI, are you looking at the risk of us becoming dependent to the point where an organization is able to charge us whatever they like, and we can't say no because our systems are completely reliant on the stuff that we're using? There's nothing on whether we're exploring alternatives to that. And I was wondering if you thought that either we have or that we needed a specialist on AI to be helping inform the assessment of risk for the City Council going forwards.
I think, well, first of all, it's a question really for IT rather than myself. But what I would say is that in terms of our own systems, of course, our own systems are protected in terms of the cyber essentials. That's stuff we do because we are aware of the fact that we need to make sure that we can't be hacked and that our data can't be stolen, etc. So there's that side of it, and that's why there's so many actions coming through in terms of the IT risk. In terms of being dependent, I think, you know, we're kind of beyond that because that's about the marketplace, isn't it? Microsoft are probably the biggest providers of technology. We use them, probably does every authority use them. If they decide to double their prices, this is an alternative in the market. And we're not here to generate that market. You know, City of York councils spend on IT is a pittance, isn't it, in terms of influencing the market? So if there's no alternative, you are left in that position. It then becomes a financial risk, and you would have to pay it. In terms of AI, I mean, AI in itself is quite a broad term. You know, systems will go and take data off our website, for example, which they legitimately can do that on their own search, but it can't get into our systems. I think the discussion earlier that we're saying we've got encrypted systems, say, around council tax, all the process. Nothing can get into that. The AI can't scan that and take that data. It can only take data that we put in the public domain, unless our system gets completely hacked and the government system gets hacked. And that's why we spend so much money and time and effort in trying to defend that, as does every authority and as does government departments. On occasion, some do, and there's nothing you can really do about that. The hackers get cleverer and cleverer. We try and put more and more defences in, but eventually that may happen. Is it a risk? Yes, and it is a risk, but it's so far not materialised at the authority. We do everything in our power to stop it materialising.
So you don't think we need an independent specialist in that particular area?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer
Right,
that. It will be
okay,
something that, you know, that
Yeah,
you know,
that's fine.
head of IT could probably give you a better answer to that.
Okay.
But I would probably suggest that possibly not, because the reality is that tech's changing all the time, and that person is one person, and they might not be here. You know, they're not always going to be here, and also our systems that we share with other organisations address some of that. So all our PSN stuff is the health service. There's all sorts of stuff going on across the organisations in protecting our data. So I think the fear I can understand, but the reality is a little bit different at this point in time. And you know, our biggest concern would be being hacked. And that's not just AI, that's just individual hackers hacking into your system. It's not about using AI. They're just very clever people who will see it as a challenge and try and crack your coding and get in and steal data.
Okay, thank you. If I can just offer one observation, and I've made it at a previous meeting. When you say there are no alternatives to using Microsoft, the reality is that in Europe for the past 12 years, they've been encouraging local authorities to move away to become more independent in relation to American software. And as I understand it, there are 500,000 to 750,000 computers now in local authorities across Europe running on European software that doesn't require annual licenses. And so my questions are just putting out feelers, because I get the feeling that in this country we don't envisage a world where we weren't dependent on Microsoft.
Again, I'm not an expert to answer that, but what I would say is we used to have our own systems, we used to have our own revenue systems, etc. But the cost of having your developers, etc., is so expensive that actually the Microsoft alternatives is a cheaper option. So there's a cost around that. So if you said we wanted to develop our own revenue systems, we wanted to have our own whatever, then yeah, if you've got the money to do it, you could do it. I don't know how Europe are doing it, so I'm not saying don't do it. All I'm saying is if it goes back to money, Microsoft gives us probably the best. And going through the procurement regulations, we've got to look for what's the best value for the authority. And there may be other developers come along, but we've got to accept there's a big monopoly with the American suppliers in the market that is quite hard to break without a lot of money being pumped in, and we're probably not in that position.
Well, I'm not endorsing a particular product, but I will say...
No, I'm not endorsing them either. I'm just saying I know why we're doing it.
No, but I would just say there are European products like LibreOffice that function essentially like Microsoft, but don't have annual license fees. And I can tell you, I've used it personally for 3 years without any problem. I just wish we were looking more imaginatively at our options, but thank you for the answers you've given.
I'm sorry, I'm answering those without talking to the head of IT. So I,
yes,
you know,
you've said that, so that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just think it's worth pointing out that this is about key corporate risks, and if there's suggestions about IT improvements or anything like that, I don't think they're for this committee, but happy to take them away with Councillor Vassy separately, but I don't think they're for this committee.
Okay, Councillor Rose.
Thanks. As an aside, I've been using LibreOffice since about 2007. I like it, but I don't think it's appropriate for the council. But as I say, it's not for this committee. Just a few things that I think it'd be good to ask the risk owners to take a look at, including. I mean, I back the recommendation to make direct reference to AI on KCR2 on both the risk detail and controls. I think it is worth calling it out specifically. The KCR1 financial pressures, the only action that's listed is the financial strategy. And I know that then includes everything else we do, but if there's anything specific or tangible within or out with the strategy that's notable for listing, it'd be useful to see we're doing something about the finance that isn't just, you know, looking at the strategy, like something more tangible. The other one on KCR2 governance one is, I think it'd be good to flag and to list in the risk detail that we have an inability for the constitution reviews that we've got in our own policy around reviewing the whole constitution every 6 months, and the risk around the working group keeping up a sustained pace on any updates and changes. I think it's self-evident that there's a risk there around our governance and how fast we can adapt to changes when we identify something. It sometimes takes more than a year to look at something once it's spotted. And then the only other one was on KCR 4, which is the demographics changing risk. There's no reference at all to student housing and impact on family housing, which I think is worth calling out. Has been discussed a million times in many other different categories, but that changing demographic is a specific impact that we mentioned other similar things, but not that bit. But I don't think there's anything for discussion today. I just wanted to call out that they're not mentioned on here, and I think they probably should be.
Okay, thank you. I guess if those things could be considered, and so okay. Can't see any further questions there, so we're happy then to move on to Annex C, which is the analysis of key corporate risk 5 on safeguarding. Just if there's any questions, comments people would like to raise on this. Councillor Merritt.
Yeah, if we look at KCR 5 in terms of the overall KCR in Annex A, the second point within the possible the risk detail is poor outcomes from statutory inspections, Ofsted or the CQC assessment. Given the result that we actually had on the CQC assessment, what do we feel didn't work in terms of the risk assessment process? Which mitigations weren't effective, or were the missing mitigations in the previous versions of this before the CQC?
Thank you. So in fact, the CQC assessment didn't conclude that the mitigations failed. In fact, the Secretary of State, when the then Secretary of State, when they wrote to us, given the CQC outcome, said in their letter, which is published, that they felt assured that adults were safe in York and kept safe. So it is possible to have a poor outcome or a lower score on a particular area in the CQC assessment that requires improvement or is inadequate, that hasn't necessarily led to significant harm or death for an adult. And obviously the full detail of the assessment is outlined in the CQC report on the improvement programme that we've been bringing through to scrutiny into the improvement board. The kind of key areas are around safe systems, and that includes a range of things. So in particular, how we work as a partnership, so the responsibilities for safeguarding obviously are not just for the council alone. We tend to say that safeguarding is everybody's business, but actually we do have statutory responsibilities to work in partnership with key statutory and other partners in the city to safeguard adults, reference through the Safeguarding Adult Board. And safe systems also, for example, considers the timeliness of safeguarding responses. So there wasn't reference to a sort of specific incident where timeliness had led to a specific cause of harm. However, in that case, in that instance, the assessment said, you know, it will be better if the timeliness were improved. So the longer it takes, for example, to triage a safeguarding concern once it's received, potentially the greater chance that you might miss something in that triaging. So that's one of the areas that we've really significantly improved over the last year to year and a half. I think the key areas that we've, I guess, addressed in terms of the analysis are primarily around strengthening those systems of practice, strengthening assurance, and, for example, the risk rating process that we've put in place for the timeliness of all assessments and safeguarding concerns that we receive, so that we can see that and respond to that at a senior management level as well as an individual case level. And this is a significantly improved partnership approach, particularly around things like the introduction of a multi-agency risk management process in relation to self-neglect, which has been introduced recently. So that allows key professionals to work together to put plans in place to support adults who, for example, might not be as willing to engage with professionals maybe self-neglecting in terms of things like hoarding behaviours or medical self-neglect. And it can be, you know, sometimes particularly difficult to work to support if they're not consenting or agreeing to support from partners. And that multi-agency risk management process is designed to work with that individual and key partners that are, you know, that might be involved with them or know them, to sometimes just seek to manage that risk over perhaps a longer term. One of the things that we would also always say is that we can't always guarantee that we're going to remove all risk for all people in all areas of their life, but often it's about, you know, thinking about how we just continue to work with people and keep the door open to support people, particularly in those cases of self-neglect.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just curious, with regards to the sort of areas of improvement that the CQC raised, and you're obviously doing a hell of a lot of work to sort of step up to what they're highlighting. I'm wondering if there's any areas yet that you think the council still haven't quite got on top of that you will eventually get on top of, because you can't do everything all the time. Any sort of outstanding challenges that you feel like we're not quite working through yet?
So we haven't fixed everything yet, obviously. That's the summary answer. And in fact, our improvement programme is a 2-year programme. So as you know, there's a lot to do and we're not going to do it all at once. We have, for really good reasons that I'm sure you'll understand, prioritised a lot of the work around safeguarding in particular and safe systems. So we took some immediate actions when we, you know, as and when we've identified concerns that, you know, would be about people's safety. We're always going to want to improve, and I think you know, that's really key. And I think actually a key part of the safe systems that we operate within are those opportunities to learn from each other, from other local authorities, and to understand how we can continue to take account of sort of, you know, changes in the way that people live, changes in legislation, changes in approaches, and how we work with people. So, you know, the overall programme, again, it's over a 2-year period. We aim to improve to the point where we are not inadequate in any of those areas. And then beyond that, we'd be aiming to move towards good and then hopefully outstanding at some point in time, like our children's services have achieved. I've just referenced as well that, you know, there are current and ongoing changes to national legislation that impact this area. So members of the committee may be aware that there's been the recent introduction of a national safeguarding board. I believe that the then Minister for Care chaired the first, or opened the first, National Safeguarding Adults Board in June, which was chaired by the Chief Social Worker. And there will be some ongoing changes to the Care Act guidance around safeguarding, in particular around clarifying types of abuse and how we work with people in situations of homelessness and substance use, for example. So, you know, as and when those changes happen, we will need to continue to work to improve to make sure that we're responding to that, and again, responding to the learning that we take from safeguarding adult reviews in the city. To answer your question, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Can't see any further questions at that point. So I thank you all for your reports this evening and for the, obviously, for the hard work that goes into it. And so you're very welcome to stay, but you're also very welcome to go. Moving then to item 8, which is the annual governance statement. Patrick. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Patrick Looker, Assistant Director Finance. Apologies for probably preparing half the pages on this agenda. They're all the finance related, and they're primarily related to the statements of accounts. Introduce.
Press it harder. Helen Mayland, Finance Manager for Place and Central Services. So I've had some input on the annual governance statement and the statement of accounts this year.
So, yeah, the annual governance statement, the draft one, which is included in these papers, are part of the draft statement of accounts, and as such have been published as part of the accounts that went on our website on the 30th of June. Members of A&G have previously requested that this item is considered separately on the agenda rather than part of the whole set of accounts. It is a draft, as it says in the covering reports. It's a live document. We're constantly updating it or regularly updating it, and any issues that happen before the final accounts are published will take into account in that statement. The report will also ultimately be signed by the leader and the head of paid service, but this will be done closer to the time when the final audited accounts are published. So the recommendations in the report of comment and from yourselves and to note the draft report.
Thank you. And are there any comments, questions that anybody would like to raise? Councillor Bessie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've read the report with interest, but there was a particular phrase that resonated with me. And it was, what are our governance arrangements and are they fit for purpose? And this isn't a reflection on those who've been producing the report, but I think to myself, I was on the North Yorkshire Pension Fund Committee for 3 years. Every time we met quarterly, we spent several hours training the day before to make sure we properly understood what we were looking at. And we're looking at 427 pages here. And I haven't received any training at all to be on this committee. And it worries me when we talk about fit for purpose. I would very much like to think that going forwards, we were able to make the time to ensure that all the members of this committee had a better grasp of the detail, so that we were able to play a more constructive and informed role. Our independent members may have much more of a grasp, they've come from outside. But I'm aware of that as a vulnerability, and I wanted to flag it here because I think it would benefit us all. Thank you, Chair.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Bassin. I can only apologise. We would ordinarily offer training, we have done in the past. Unfortunately, we're very light on staff. Emma, who normally does the accounts, our lead technical accountant, is on maternity leave. So unfortunately, Helen and some others have managed to step in, but we haven't backfilled them on maternity leave. So we are short of staff, but that's no excuse. Yeah, we should have offered training. We have done in the past. We just ran out of time. So apologies for that. We can certainly facilitate that before the final accounts are completed, and we can arrange that then, because again, as part of the ongoing work plan for member training, we've also got Treasury management on that list of things that we think needs a better understanding. So we can certainly incorporate something on the accounts and something on Treasury management before the next time we ask you to consider them, if that's acceptable.
If we could, I think that would be invaluable. I'm just aware, sitting on the Pension Fund Committee, we'd spend 3 hours the day before we'd meet to actually make decisions or offer serious comment, and it was invaluable. So, okay.
Yeah, I welcome that suggestion as well. First time I looked at this, I had no idea what the heck I was looking at, and asking what, with hindsight, are stupid questions, although Debbie would always deny it. But asking a lot of questions that I wouldn't ask at this point, and this time around I came in and I knew what was going on and it was fine. But I've had annual training every year on this, and I guess there's a risk there that if we always do it just before the annual accounts, which is the best time to do it, if that window happens to be light on staff or similar, then there's an element of risk there. But you know, we have had good training in the past. There is good training available. It's just the timing that hasn't worked on this one. I guess the other thing to point on that is sometimes it does feel a bit hand crank on governance, and similar to you, the phrase that stuck out to me was the operate in a lawful, open, inclusive, and honest manner. And I feel like we make that happen, but there's a lot of hand cranking, and the governance arrangements don't necessarily automate that. And so the same with this, that if you ask, you'll get that training, but sometimes the kind of rails, if you like, the guardrails don't really operate and make sure that it definitely does happen. And that was kind of my only takeaway was, I don't know how open, inclusive, and honest our governance always is. But I do agree with the content of the report. I think the report is good. I think that compared to a lot of equivalent organisations, we function very well. Audit and governance, particularly around finances, I think we're a really robust organisation. The only comment I had actually, and a comment I didn't make in previous years, but there are 14 references to continuous improvement. It should be continual improvement. It's the most pedantic point I ever make, but I do make it in most organisations that I'm in. But that's the most I could come up with, which I think is a testament to the quality of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good. Yes, cut and paste a different wording. Any further questions with the annual governance statement? We're happy, otherwise just to note that. Move on to the statement of accounts. Is there anything additional to say?
Yeah, so obviously this is the bulk of the agenda. The accounts and audit regulations require authorities to publish the accounts by 30th of June each year. I'm pleased to report that this date was met, and I would like to put on record that is due to the hard work and determination of the finance team. You can't overstate how complicated some of this work is, and the hard work of the accountants particularly, and the accounting technicians in the team to actually get this ready by the 30th of June is a significant effort. The accounts are now open for inspection from the 1st of July. That's a 6-week period, 30 working days. That was due to end on the 11th of August. We have had some interest from members of the public, and we're dealing with those queries as we speak. The draft accounts do total over 200 pages, large number of tables and explanatory notes, some of which are incredibly technical. I'm happy to field any questions you may have on the accounts process, although the accountant, as Debbie mentioned, Emma's on maternity leave, and the other accountant who then took that work up is on leave this week as well. So I've got Helen with me, so hopefully we'll help with some of the more technical queries if you have technical queries today. And then for Ms. Mazars, the council's external auditors, Mark's sitting behind me. They'll be auditing the accounts. They'll be doing their work probably over, their plan is October and December. The accounts alongside the auditor's report will be tabled at January's audit and governance meeting, which should allow us to publish the accounts by the deadline of the 31st of January, which is a month earlier this year than it was the previous year. So you're recommended to note the pre-draft statement of accounts, but as I say, we'll answer any queries that you might have at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions anybody like to raise? Councillor Rose?
Yeah, how would you like me to do it? Just pick a few, starting at the beginning?
Just start until you've finished.
I think a positive one first, just to check my understanding on page 149, the top end is the overall outturn position for the council, says that plus is an overspend. So my understanding, and just to double check that, minus 1498 is that we came in £1.5 million better than our original budget.
Yes, there was an underspend of 1.5 million, and that money's been put into general reserves. That was approved at executive couple of weeks ago.
Just positive news. Rare when I get it in our finances. One that I think is an error. Same page, in the text above the table under reserves, it says 135 mil compared to 138 mil, and the table underneath then says it went from 138 to 134. Am I right that that's just a typo? It should be 134 in the text above.
From very quick look at that, yes, I would agree with you that I should just say 134 million.
Thanks. If I could, yeah, just take that away. Next page on the fair funding review at the bottom of page, top of page 150. It talks about the freeze effectively in core spending power, despite council tax increase. I just wanted to check. My understanding was the freeze was based on a level of projected economic growth that we then didn't see in the last 2 quarters. What's the process around ongoing review of those assumptions? That might be, I'm not sure, it might be somebody else's question, but is there that ongoing conversation around the fair funding review?
Well, the Fair Funding Review was originally set out this time last year. We had the summer with a consultation, and the government came up with their final responses to the Fair Funding Review in February. And effectively, they've now set us a 3-year spending envelope and amount that we'll receive in grants, how much they expect us to raise in council tax and business rates. It's not expected currently that there'll be any particular move on any of the numbers that were incorporated in that 3-year settlement. So that is what, as officers, we are working for in recommending the budget to members. So
I guess it's a question for our executive to take upwards and S151 to take upwards. But my understanding is that that if these 2 quarters were their assumptions when they made the Fair Funding Review, we would have received more. And therefore, if we've got 3 years based on numbers that were assumed and projected but didn't actually then happen, whether there's anything we can do about that. I know there'll be a lot of other councils in a similar situation, but I
think the issue is it's our share of the pie, and therefore pie is not changing size, so we still get the same. So they can change their assumptions and move it around, doesn't create any more money necessarily, and therefore it might change. But as Patrick said, it's closed as far as we've been told from MHCLG when we've made representation. They've completed the Fair Funding Review. They allocated our 3-year spending envelope. End of conversation. From an officer perspective, obviously there'll be other conversations ongoing.
Yeah, and understand we've got to change the government. It might change other things, but I think we challenged those assumptions at the time and we were proven correct. So just want to call it out. Similar but different business rates. I've been working with some local businesses and non-profits that have had some issues where their base amount hasn't really increased. So we don't really receive anything more, but they've had various discounts taken away from them. And I just wanted to know if that was something that had been taken away. I'm looking at the details here. It says, page 306, for example, the rateable value is actually slightly decreased across York, but we've got some small organisations that are really struggling with that. And yet despite them paying more, we're not getting more. Again, is there something we can do around? I know Andy Bennett has been talking about small businesses, but I haven't heard this raised at any point. Is that something we can raise upwards?
We in terms of business rates, we're a collection agent for the government, so we don't have any influence. We don't determine the amounts, we don't determine the rateable value, we don't determine the multipliers. We are literally a collection agent on behalf of government. Unfortunately, David is our expert on business rates, and he's left the meeting now. But there's a lot more we could do a briefer note. We've got a lot more information on business rates. It has changed enormously, and it was one of the things we struggled to forecast, wasn't it, when we were doing our MTFS last year in November, when we were waiting for the outcome of the Fair Funding Review, because there were so many different changes, and in the end we had to wait for our software supplier to make the changes so that we could actually play it through, because some things went up, some things went down, as you say, and we struggled to work out the impact both on ourselves and on businesses. So I think we do, it's all there now, isn't it? Patrick, I don't know whether you know any more, but it's a separate briefing note after.
Yeah, I think we collect the best part of £100 million of business rates across the city. And you're absolutely right, some businesses will be better off, some will be worse off. Overall, the amount that we're collecting across the city is broadly the same. There has been quite a significant change in how the multipliers have worked and how reliefs are calculated. But of that 100 million that we collect, in terms of what we can incorporate within our budget, is only 22 million now. So 38 million, it was always shared 50-50, but 38 million is now classed as a tariff, which we then pass it back to the government, who then redistribute it within the rest of the local government finance settlement. So we really are at a very low level of business rates that we actually incorporate within our budget now.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's not the time to discuss business rates in general, and we're not in control of what those business rates are or the level we receive. It's just noting that given our financial strains, business rates are a large part of the revenue we have, and it isn't just that on average they balance out. We have businesses in York, small businesses, that are paying more on average, but we're not receiving that because it comes down to how reliefs and stuff are calculated more than it is about the rateable value. I just wanted to flag that that's something that I would recommend us raising, given that it is related to issues that have been raised at a Prime Minister level in the last few weeks. It would be something that I'd hope we can change. It sounds like the conversation's about how we can help small businesses, my thinking is, how can we help the council if they're making those changes one way or the other? We just need to be mindful of it. I didn't want to kind of relitigate business rates, but it felt like an important point on finance. I've got a few others, but okay. Page 157, we've got non-current assets only increasing in value by 0.5%. I would have expected land value to kind of increase it beyond that. It then gets into like a bit of technical detail around depreciation of 40 mil, council house stock depreciation of 12 mil, heritage assets on that page say 1.6 mil, but on note 13 in the detail, it's closer to parity than it is 1.6 mil depreciation. And then there's a bit around page 169, intangible assets have trebled, but then page 218 talking about the same thing doesn't look as large. And I'm a little bit confused that when I'm looking at different bits of the same thing, they look like they're telling me different numbers. It's probably my lack of knowledge. But there's a bit later on as well around depreciation of land. I think page 212, depreciation of land is set at 90 years, but I don't know what depreciation of land means if land is accruing value by existing. How does that work?
Well, the figure certainly on page 157 is 1.6 billion. So we're talking incredibly large numbers that have changed not significantly. So we're saying that our non-current assets were just short of 1.6 billion. They're now around 1.55 billion. It's around the same number. What we do have is, and it's one thing that Mazars certainly will be looking at, is our valuers look at all our assets on a regular basis. We've had a new requirement from SITFA, and as part of the code of practice, we now have to do a valuation, and then we have to index all our valuations over a period of years until we do another valuation. So at the moment, we're sort of in between changes in the code where we've been valuing some of the assets this year, which will then have to be indexed going forward, and some other assets we'd valued a couple of years ago, and we've had to backdate some of those indexes as well. So there's a very complicated set of numbers, in certainly around valuations, which are kind of paper numbers, which is difficult to actually then place to make a clear understanding of. The council, if it sold everything, could get 1.6 billion, because that's patently not the case, because to have an asset, you've got to find someone who wants to buy an asset. And this will include some very strange land and buildings that we've got. So in terms of land, again, there's some clear regulations that we have to follow, and our valuers will follow those regulations. So the view is that on the whole, we don't appreciate land particularly, unless there's particular circumstances why that's needed. So we very much leave it to our valuers to come up with the numbers on these, because that's their profession. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it includes the city walls in our assets and stuff, which good luck selling them and what would happen to them. But I do appreciate that. And the first time I was looking at this, it's some numbers go up, some numbers go down. You're trying to do the maths of it. I'm thankfully a little bit more clued up now, to the point that I could sit down with the 5 different pages and go, okay, does this maths work? And it comes out to me that yes, the kind of revaluation of specific assets is done, and the kind of depreciation of council housing and repairs and stuff is all balanced. But when I was looking at just value of land, it looks like we're depreciating land, not seeing land increase in value year on year, which in York I would expect it to. But that might be my maths and my understanding being, I mean, I'm certainly not an accountant, but I just wanted to flag that as overall we've had a 0.5% increase, when I would imagine pretty much any asset owner of multiple properties in York will have seen several percent increase year on year. Something to look at, but just wanted to check if I was like completely missing a major thing or not. Page 220, current debtors. I don't think this is a Treasury management thing. I just wanted to check if it is just Treasury management. But page 220, we've got the current debtors columns on the right hand side went from 33 to 58, which is a 76% increase. And then on page 228, We have short-term debtors receivables going up from 36.5 to 62, which is a 69% increase. That's a big year-on-year increase, but it didn't look like it was just Treasury management and borrowing. Could I understand better what the debtors thing is this year, if that's okay?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 main factors in this one. Firstly, it's West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the time it's taken to make the changes that were required, particularly on York Station Gateway, but also York Outer Ring Road, and the change requests that we were needing to make. So those schemes were funded from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, but until they'd agreed their change requests, which they didn't do till March, all the payments that we were making for York Station Gateway in the meantime were being funded from the council. So at the end of the year, we were due over £10 million from WICA. That money has now come in, but at the time of 31st of March, we were still awaiting for it. So there was a significant gap there. The second one is the change in arrangements with the North York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, where previously we were receiving funds from DFT directly for things like bus service improvement plan, local transport plan, highway maintenance. Under the arrangements on the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, we now are claiming those and getting them more in arrears than we were previously. So money that we were sitting on historically to fund our capital expenditure, we're now having to put through as debtors at the end of the year. So those were the 2 most significant ones that I identified when I was sort of doing the review of picking the similar figure that those debtors have gone up significantly. So historically, going forward, the number should reduce because we've now got the money from West Yorkshire Combined Authority, but there will always be the bigger gap now in terms of funding coming through.
Timing issues, aren't they? These are the accounts as at the 31st of March. If the money comes in on the 1st of April, it's not in here. So it is just timing, and that's where we hold the timing difference.
Thanks. It makes sense, the explanations you've given as well on those 2 specific ones. Last one from me is page 165, and then again note 9 on page 208 around other operating expenditure going up 73%. The detail on page 208 is the gains losses on the disposal of non-current assets have gone from 5.7 to 10.5 mil. I don't know what that means, even reading the notes. What's doubled in that space in the year, or gone up by 80%? It's note 9.
So note 9, which begins with
gains losses on the disposal of non-current assets increase.
We'll probably have to go to our expert in that one and just go back and check it. So it's page 165 and 218, what you're saying?
Yes, page 208.
Yeah. We'll get a response back to the committee.
I found one. You were doing so well covering for all the experts not being in the room, as it were. But yeah, no, it was only because it's 5 mil or so that I thought I couldn't quite work out what that actually meant.
Yes, on page 10 of the statement, page 149 of the bundle, we have the table of the reserves and then some text afterwards that explains the different reserves. I'm afraid I found it slightly confusing when you come to the general fund balance and the earmarked general fund reserves, because the second paragraph talks about the general fund reserve balance of 9 million, but that actually appears to be the general fund balance, not the general fund reserves. But more particularly, the general fund, the earmarked general fund reserves is obviously the most substantial of all the reserves, but isn't really explained to the same degree as to what it is and why it's so large.
So, through your chair, yeah, the general fund balance is effectively the general fund reserve that we set as part of the budget. 7.4 million is the value. Because there was the £1.5 million underspend, it went up, but there's also some of the school balances are also incorporated within that. The earmarked general fund reserves, there is a note, and I probably need to dig out exactly where the note is in the accounts, which does give further detail for the what's in the earmarked general fund reserves. The main one off the top of my head is developer contributions, or a significant one. Not a big chunk of that is the 13-14 million pounds that we've got for developer section 106s, but there's also another list in terms of the venture fund.
It's note 8, Patrick, in the accounts that talks about transfers to and from earmarked reserves, that lists them, the risk reserve, the DSG, business rate reserves. So they're reserves held for a specific purpose that at this stage they're set aside to deal with something that we know is going to happen, whether that is like, you know, like I said, the DSG reserve, again, just to deal with those timing differences. There are some miscellaneous reserves, which I don't think we list out, do we, Patrick? But includes things like Care Act funds, YFAS funds. There's a whole long list, isn't there, of things that are set aside. Again, it's about timing differences. If you haven't spent it by the 31st of March, some of the reserves they carry forward into the following year to be spent in the following year, and it's just where we hold those balances before they're spent in the new year.
It might be worth just putting a little bit more in the final version of
Yeah,
this.
sure. Page 207 does detail them down to more of a level. It includes the collection fund reserve as well, which is again timing differences between how much we're actually collecting from business rates and council tax and how much we release into the general fund and how much we pass on to our various partners.
Okay. I don't see any further questions there, so I'll thank you for your time again this evening, and thank you to the sort of team as well. I know it's obviously a huge amount of work, and I'm sure we all appreciate the effort that's put into it. So thank you. Yeah. It was good to turn this number of pages. Feel like we're
355, yeah.
on the home straight now. Item 10, then Treasury Management Outturn report.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a requirement of the Prudential Code that members regularly review and approve Treasury Management reports regularly. Too regularly, and we do this through reports to the Executive and Audit and Governance Committee, so covered by two different parts of the organisation. This report is the year-end position for 2025-26. The report was considered by Executive on the 7th of July, and it's that report that went to Executive is attached as the covering report. So the report includes information around total council borrowing over the year, the amounts that we've invested, the returns that were made on those investments. Borrowing increased by £19 million, although that does include an HRA repayment that we made at the very end of the year of just short of 10 million. So effectively, we borrowed £29 million more for general fund schemes. Interest rates available for local authorities through PWLB, the Public Works Loan Board, they've remained stubbornly high, and there's now really no expectation that they're going to reduce, certainly not significantly over the coming months of years, and we probably now need to consider these interest rates as the new normal. Currently, short-term borrowing remains cheaper than long-term borrowing, so we are still continuing to do relatively short length borrowing, but we are regularly reviewing that. The figure 4 on page 371 does show that there's 53.75 million which will mature in 26-27, and given what might happen with interest rates, that does leave us with a risk. In 25-26, I think the equivalent figure was 68 million. So we have done a bit of work in sort of pushing some of those loans back into future years, and ideally we do need to look at whether we can spread that over a longer period. But other than that, the recommendation is that you scrutinise and note the report. So again, any questions that you've got, happy to take.
Thank you. Are there any questions? That's right.
Yes, it's a straightforward one. I mean, the report's really good and everything looks sensible to me. Noting the 54 mil of debt maturity this year and the 353 mil total debt. My main question is just, this was prepared under a previous Prime Minister. Is there anything that's been announced or said or hinted at that suggests we might need to tweak anything? I know you mentioned, for example, the stable interest rates. There are a million assumptions we make in Treasury. I just guess, is there anything that's been said that hints at a tweak to how we look at things?
Obviously, we're very early into the new Prime Minister's day, so we await the announcement of the Chancellor, and a lot of the PWLB rates are really around what the bond markets think of the confidence of where the government is. We didn't see any particular changes to PWLB rates at that time, so I think the words of having the fiscal rules and so on and so forth. So, but we just have to wait and see on that.
Must admit, I do appreciate table 3 and the pie chart on paragraph 24, compared with the combined authority, which I keep raising the concern about how much money they have as cash in the bank. This is absolutely superb. For those of us who also sit on the combined authority A and G, their performance far worse than this.
Okay, any further questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Would members like a short break? Yeah. Okay. Shall we come back at, shall we say 10 past? Right, welcome back, everybody. If we move on then to item 11, which is the external audit progress report.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. So this is it's actually our audit strategy memorandum for the year ending 31st of March 26. And the executive summary gives an overview of the scope of our work, which includes an audit of your financial statements, completion of our value for money reporting requirements, and our wider reporting responsibilities. Sorry. We plan to report the audit by December 26 ahead of the January 27 deadline. Pages 11 to 12 of our report set out the significant risks that we've identified, which are management override of controls, where we focus on any unusual transactions and journal entries, valuation of council properties, including investment properties, and valuation of pension assets and liabilities. Both the valuation risks are high value and include complex estimates and judgments, which could result in material misstatement. We will also consider the Council's approach to the new indexation approach, which we've highlighted on page 36 of our report. And it's worth noting that these risks are consistent with other councils and the prior year. Page 14 of the report sets out our materiality levels. This has been based on gross expenditure, as it did in the previous year, and it was based on the draft accounts. Materiality headline is set at 11.2 million. Performance materiality is being set at approximately 9 million, and triviality threshold is just over 330,000. And that is the point that we will report any identified errors to you. Page 16 includes the table setting out the fees payable to the PSAA, and page 20 onwards sets out our latest position on your value for money work, where we've identified one significant weakness in your capital project management and governance arrangements, as we highlighted last year. We will assess the Council's progress in strengthening its project management, governance and scrutiny arrangements, evaluating how the identified weakness has been addressed. Page 23 also highlights 4 other recommendations raised in previous audits, which we will also follow up on. The other sections of the report confirm our independence and provide an update on forthcoming accounting and other issues. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? That's all right.
Lighter on people now, so it's going to be more me. No, it's just 2. The first is on page 398, which is the fees page. Obviously, there's a lot of TBC for the year ahead. I guess, is there any sense of whether we should be expecting it to be similar to last year, lower, higher? Is there any kind of indication at this point in time as to what the balance of probabilities will be?
It's difficult to say. There is the indexation approach. We've never done it before, so we don't know how much work's involved, and it will be particular to each of the councils. And then in regard to our statutory duties, if we get a letter from the public, again, it's difficult to say how much work is involved in that. So I cannot give you a ballpark figure really, but
I guess over the last few years, has it been relatively stable, or does it wildly up and down?
it does go up and down quite a bit depending on what's new in year. But I'd say last year was probably more stable than in the past.
But my only other question was around the capital project management, governance, station gateway stuff. There's nothing in here that I wanted to ask about, and we've talked it to death over the last year, but I was just curious, given that you've been so involved and had so many conversations over the year, whether there's any new learnings on top of the conversations we've had before. Obviously, we've recently just had another amount of overspend approved, but it feels like that's due to the pre-existing weak controls, in previous years, rather than anything new emerging. But I just want to get your take as the best external independent voice that we've got on this one.
At this stage, I'm not going to comment, but we will comment when we've had a look at it in depth.
Okay, that's a merit.
Thank you. On page 14 of your report on the materialities, I'm just sort of comparing those with the ones we saw yesterday at the combined authority. And you've used a very different figure for the specific materiality on termination payments and packages, and I just wondered why.
That's a good question. So it is based on a risk base and what we found in the past. In the past here, we did have an issue in and around exit packages, so it reflects that risk that we assigned to that particular item of account.
Thank you.
It's a question for our side of the fence, which is all these TBCs, how do we budget it? Do we make an assumption that we're the same? Do we budget it at 0 and then get wildly surprised when it's definitely not 0? Or
we budget it broadly the same with a small uplift usually. So as Mark says, depending on how many letters and the depth and the number of issues raised in those letters will determine the amount of work that Mark and his team need to do. And like I say, that if there are any changes to the other ones are like the subsidy claims, aren't they, and those kind of things. And
you could probably make a
yeah, we tend to budget the same, and we'll make a small allowance for an uplift, not a significant amount, but if there is significant work to do on an objection, for example, that's not budgeted for that level of expenditure.
thanks. That's what I was hoping you'd say. So just because it goes, the actual fee total is 414 down to 314, but I would hope we'd do 414 plus contingencies then.
Okay, I can't see any further questions, so thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
We move on then to item 11, which is the annual report to the Chair of Audit and Governance. Which you have and is
To minimise comment and questions, Chair.
Is it what, sorry?
Is it deliberately short to minimise comments and questions? Or sweet and succinct?
I'd say short and sweet. Does anybody read these things? Apart from Jason. Well, I mean, when it gets to full council.
It looks accurate to me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we're all deliriously happy with that. And item 13 then is the counter fraud progress report.
Good evening, I'm Jonathan Dodsworth. I'm the counter fraud manager for the City of York for Verita. I'd like to just highlight a few things from our report, which starts on page 427 of your packs. At the last meeting, we discussed the financial target and a reduction in the resource for counter fraud work. Following discussions with our client officers, Bryn and Debbie, we've decided to maintain the £200,000 savings target for this year and evaluate it over the course of the year. The council's whistleblowing policy has been updated, and I've included it in Appendix B of the report. The policy is now in line with legislation, and it references sexual harassment as a protected disclosure for whistleblowing. Moving on, we're still receiving large numbers of referrals of potential fraud to the team. We've received 119 reports to the end of June. We've completed 30 investigations, and 11 people have been cautioned or received warnings. I've also highlighted some good pieces of work to my mind. We supported the council in a planning application appeal where there was fraudulent documentation provided. And we've also undertook a proactive exercise looking to stop the use of residential parking permits by landlords of holiday lets. So 3 permits have been removed to date, and a further 10 properties are under investigation. The team has helped achieve £88,000 of counter fraud savings in the first quarter of the year. Appendix A has further details of investigative work. I'm happy to take any questions. about the report.
Thank you. I'll just ask if there are any questions. On Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Mr. Dodsworth. I guess I'm just curious, are there any sort of restrictions on what you and the council can publicise in terms of successful investigations? So, for instance, the parking permit issue and was it Airbnb, an Airbnb landlord putting stuff out there to say we're on to you might make people think twice. Do we do much of that? Could we do more of it?
I think it's a good point because publicizing things creates a deterrent. However, to publicize it properly and name and shame, I think as we're talking about, we have to have undertaken legal action. I think we have to proven criminality has taken place. A lot of our work doesn't reach the court stage for various reasons. There's not enough evidence to take it forward to that degree. It's not economic to do that. It exposes the council to too great a risk to take a case to court. You know, if someone decided to plead innocent or plead not guilty and go to Crown Court, then council could be looking at barristers, and a case that's worth £1,000 could suddenly be costing the council £10,000 to prosecute. Wouldn't be good value for the council or the taxpayer. We try and publicize. We do publicize cases where people are prosecuted. We try and publicize these type of situations where we show that the council is taking steps to address fraud. So, for example, we did a blue badge day of action in May. That was publicized because we want people to know that they can't come to York and misuse a blue badge. But at the same time, if we don't prosecute somebody, we're not going to attach a name to those cases.
Sure.
And prosecuting people, it's a big thing if you think about it. That affects somebody's life, and it's about fairness as well. So the council would only prosecute someone where it is where the evidence is there and it's in the public interest to do so. In a lot of our cases, it's not in the public interest to take that kind of action, and I don't think we would take it purely to publicize their names, if that logic makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to guess a supplementary on that, I've got a little list of questions from Christian, but I'll not attempt the impression. But you want, just in terms of the blue badges and the sort of day of action, sort of looked at 80 and found 2 that were being used fraudulently, and it was just suspected, allegedly. It was just to give a sort of context for how many blue badges are being used across the city on a kind of average day, just to get sort of context, because obviously 2 out of 80, it's not a particularly high sort of sample, I guess, of that, is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I don't have the exact figures of how many blue badges would be used in the course of a day. I can say that our action took place over about half a day and covered various council car parks around York. Yes, 2 out of 80 doesn't sound like a lot, but is that despite the blue badge work that we do, or because of the blue badge work that we do? I would say.
I meant more the 80 wasn't necessarily a big sample. Obviously, the 2 out of 80 is probably a good thing. It's more whether 80 is a good sample of how much is being used across the city in that day, or whether it's, you know, if it's 80 out of 8,000 or if it's 80 out of 800 or.
I'd probably have to defer to colleagues in parking, but I think it's probably a pretty good representation about the number of badges in use. That, for example, I think Castle Car Park must have about 10 or 12 bays. There's only limited disabled badge bays in York.
Yeah. Okay. And is that a supplementary? Yeah.
Yeah, just we're good to get an understanding of to the extent to which that investigation isn't just the city centre. We have some, let's say, significant comments and reports of issues in Acomb, but I've never validated, or you obviously can't tell if people are using disabled bays accurate, but we have a lot of non-blue badge holders parking in disabled bays, for example, which is obviously a problem. They're very different things to what we talk about here, but I was just curious, presumably those 80 are all downtown car parks.
We work with the parking team to get a good spread around the city. So I know we have done work in Aiken before, and we have uncovered blue badge fraud there. I know there's only 2 or 3 spaces on Front Street, so it is incredibly limited. We've also done work up on Bishopthorpe Road in the car park there. East Parade, there's a small car park there, Marygate. So we try and cover quite a few car parks in the course of a day. In these kind of days of action. But normally throughout the day, as parking officers work, if they spot a badge, then they will report it to us. We will work with them in that time period to address things. So we're constantly trying to stop blue badge misuse in the city.
Thanks. I mean, just for clarity, there are 2 at one end of Front Street. There's 1 on School Street. There are 2 around the corner, and there's about 5 at Morrison's and other places dotted about. But the reason I mention that is because also blue badge holders use their blue badges to park on double yellows, which is something that we have because of the limited number of space and high demand for parking in Acomb. And I guess the second half of the question is, as part of that blue badge, what percentage of, or you know, out of that 80 or any of those double yellow parkers are we doing that kind of work in parallel to the blue badge bays?
Yes, we look at all blue badges in use on the days of action. So yes, it would cover double yellows. I would say though that the council nor ourselves are able to address car parking misuse or blue badge misuse in supermarkets. So you mentioned Morrison's. I know that annoys a lot of people, but it's not something that the council has a remit to address.
That include when it's a council-owned car park that the supermarket is based at?
I'll defer that to a legal colleague.
But it's good to see that the numbers are very, very low. That we really don't have much blue badge fraud, and you know, I can't imagine how we'll be able to police every single double yellow location for potential parking anyway. But I mean, I got yelled at this evening for taking a photo of someone parked illegally on double yellows. So even if you're checking that, it can come with some challenges. But thank you.
Okay, Councillor Merritt.
Yeah, very much welcome this report and all the work that you're doing, including on SH short-term holiday lets, which as a ward councillor, we get quite a lot of queries and comments about some of these. Perhaps are what things that we passed on. You know, there's a lot of concern about the possible abuses of the res park schemes by the short-term holiday lets. There's an awful lot of pressure on the streets in terms of the res park. So if there is abuse, it's significant in terms of its impact on adjacent residents, not just in terms of the loss of revenue and so on that's involved. So it's very pleasing to see that. Also very pleased to see the case, the planning case. One of the issues with the introduction of the HMO registration for smaller HMOs the other year is a significant number of planning applications that have come forward for, you know, I say planning applications, applications for certificate of lawfulness of the existing use on the basis that they've been there for more than 10 years. And there have been a number of cases where I've had residents querying whether they had actually been operating on the 10 years. So I wondered if that's one of the issues you've talked to planning about, whether there's any assistance you can provide in that area.
We've not received any reports of that type of fraud. I think we would welcome it. If someone was lying about that, then it would be potentially a criminal fraudulent statement being made. I will take that away. I think that this case has kind of opened up a door for new working with the planning department. So I'll certainly make some inquiries.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Burton.
Yes, and thank you for the report, and very happy to see that you're investigating the abuse of res park permits for short-term holiday lets, which is a blight in my ward too, Micklegate. I'm also wondering about their use of the refuse services, because they're running as a business. So if they're running as a business, they should be paying business waste charges. And I can imagine that would be quite difficult, but I don't know whether we could get the operatives who are collecting rubbish. They might. I know from experience, people reporting to me that you tend to get like overflowing bottle bins and things at a property, and whether you could have some interaction with the refuse services to identify any houses that are not paying the correct waste charges as well. Because I think when we first started on this committee, well, personally, holiday let parking wasn't an issue that you were looking into, and now you are, and you've found good reason to do that, which is great. So yes, waste services might be the next thing on the list to look into, because if they are running as a business and they're having domestic waste collected, then again that's an abuse really of the system. So there's just a point to note really about that. But how you find it, then I suppose maybe neighbours reporting, or as I say, the waste operative people being asked to note any large significant collections. Although I do think a lot of holiday lets take their rubbish, the cleaners take the rubbish away. Again, what do they do with that? That I think needs looking into as well, because where are they disposing of it? And I have personal experience of this. I'm next to an Airbnb and they took my rubbish away, and I said, please leave my rubbish alone. I know it's so, and what do they do with it? Where's it gone? So that's, it's a potential loss of revenue and source of fraud. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I guess if you could take that away and.
Yes, certainly. And I would like to thank the committee for raising the issues around the abuse of residential parking permits in York. It's something that I've felt the strength of feeling about it, and as a team we've targeted this, and I think we're making a real difference.
Okay, Councillor Rose.
Thanks, and I think it demonstrates that if people have a hunch that there might be an issue, there often is, and I guess the question is how we encourage residents how we educate residents on how they can raise things if they've got a concern about a house in the neighbourhood, which I imagine lots of people have that don't report anything and at most might grumble on a Facebook post or something about it. And I guess on that front, it's great to see. I think you said £200,000 target. It says 180 on page 432, but we're already on 88 and we're only a quarter of the way through the year. And the table and on 50% investigations completed successfully compared to a target of 30, which is in line with the last couple of years of really positive, way above target numbers. But underneath that, we've got the referrals received as 120 versus 300 for the year. Do we usually have a peak in the first quarter? Because this is only at the end of the first quarter that these numbers are from, or is this expected to be about a quarter of the year's amounts, in which case we've had a massive increase in the number of referrals received? Does it look like we're on track for this projection to be even or higher or lower by the end of the year?
I don't think I would read in too much to the numbers at the moment. We've had some staffing issues with the people who set up our cases and the referrals, so that could have pushed more into this quarter than normal. I think we'll know more in the next progress report. To your previous point, I would say we encourage all residents of York and people further afield, if you suspect fraud is going on against the council, we have a hotline. You can ring up and speak to somebody. You can email us and give us your information. We accept all information anonymously as well.
Okay. I'll just ask the two questions from the ghost of Councillor Vassie. So he's concerned about the lack of reference to procurement fraud, given that 50% of procurement at COIC appears not to involve a purchase order process. Is there a reason why it's not included?
I think there was a point Councillor Vassie made at the last meeting as well. I've written about some of our work around procurement fraud, and frankly, it's about engagement with the procurement team. If there's procurement fraud going on, they are best placed to spot it, and we've developed ties with them over a number of years. So if they have concerns, they do speak to us about it, and we regularly run fraud awareness sessions to help enable that to happen. I'm not going to say there's no fraud and we detect everything, but I think we do all the right things to detect fraud in this area.
Okay, thank you. And just lastly, so he's concerned about having to go to the line manager to whistleblow. And he thinks there needs to be an independent option, or there will be circumstances where staff feel deterred from raising concerns.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, but it's a point recognized by the whistleblowing policy. The line manager is the first port of call for reporting. However, if someone feels they can't report it to the line manager for whatever reason, they can report it to a more senior assistant director within the council. They can report it to Verito directly. And equally, we've the policy references external people who organizations where whistleblowing can be reported to. So I think the policy has this covered.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't see any further questions, so thank you for your time again this evening. We move on then to item 14, which is the work plan, and I believe a revised version with our meeting in September was emailed round.
Do you want me to? Thank you, Chair. So members will find that a revised version was circulated earlier by email, and obviously that will be included in the future pack. But what it shows for September is the quarter one Treasury management report from our finance colleagues, and then the major project internal audit action plan progress update. That is currently all that is listed on the agenda for the 16th of September. I would add, however, that I'm conscious that there have been discussions between the chair and Pauline Stutchfield in relation to the Your Homes issue. And I think the indication was that there would be a report brought in relation to that on 16th September as well. So if members are content, we'll add that onto the agenda. That gives a small number of items, but I think a couple of quite chunky things for members to talk through. So whilst it might be small and perfectly formed, it will equally be worthwhile for all concerned.
Okay. Any issues? Did you say, Councillor Rose, you had some? Oh, this is the time to ask you a question. Just
Terrible time to put something in my mouth, but yeah, thanks for the circulating the updated one. I guess the shortest supplemental paper of all time for slotting that onto the web. Yeah, I just want to note I guess we've also got the Constitution Working Group stuff coming through September. We've got the Audit and Governance work plan from the minutes of the last meeting, calls out a review of planning committee changes at a future date. It's not on here. A review of changes to scrutiny at a future date. It's not on here. An update on the no purchase order, no purchase policy at a future date. Not on here. And then it mentions, the Constitution Review and a few other bits and pieces as well, but they aren't on the they aren't scheduled into the plan, but they're also not listed as things not on the plan either. If September only has 2 items on it at the moment, the more of those that can be squeezed into it, the better. But I'm looking at the list and thinking not many of those are likely to be September things, but I think they definitely, they were on the minutes of these are things we resolved to have on the work plan, and they're not on the work plan. So I just wanted to make sure that I'd flagged that.
yeah. Is there anything that could be added?
Well, if I will, Chair. So certainly in relation to the review of planning committee, I think that was originally scheduled to come back in November, because it'll be roughly a year since the changes were brought into effect. So the idea was to give that time for it to bed in, do a report and then bring that back to you. Beyond that, as I say, we'll happily look at the work plan, and if we think we can get another report onto the September one, we will do. I'm conscious the Constitution Working Group is an ever evolving beast. And I know from discussions I've had earlier today with Julie Gallagher, the head of Democratic Services, that she's been looking at the Constitution and some elements of it that she thinks we probably ought to look at as well. So the working group will get to see those in due course.
Yeah, and I think the November one's perhaps not as long as it looks, partly because there's a duplicate entry and partly because the things on that list don't tend to take us too long. So usually by the time we've got to that point, we're fairly happy with the accounts, etc. So maybe some potential there in November as well. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, just in terms of the Constitution Working Group, I know at the Combined Authority we have regular updates on what the Constitution Working Group up there is doing, but I don't recall seeing that many reports from the one here to this committee, which does seem a bit of a miss.
I suppose, Chair, that's because it's an ad hoc committee here as opposed to anything formal. And I think, as I've mentioned before, part of the problem with reviewing the Constitution here is that it comes down to shoehorning it into the time that's available for officers alongside of all of the other 20 things that we're supposed to be doing at the same time. As I say, Julie is certainly starting to look at it as well, and that will help enormously, because at the very least she can identify some of the other things that the committee might want to look at. Perhaps I've mentioned previously that there is almost a standing invitation for members to highlight anything they think needs looking at, and equally, and perhaps more controversially, members might want to consider looking through the Constitution and highlighting anything they think we can remove, because it is certainly the case that the Constitution is significantly longer than anyone else's. And I think that's perhaps a reflection of the fact that we incorporate more in the Constitution than we actually need to. But that's a matter for members to consider.
That's all right.
Yeah, I mean, being slightly less delicate in my wording, it's because we do bring a paper every time there are outcomes from the working group, and we've never not brought a paper to ANG whenever there's been outcomes. So we aren't producing enough outcomes, and we have 5 items on the agenda, and we don't have a July meeting. So we are talking about it away from this meeting, but yeah, flagging that as the main reason that we don't get many updates here, because we only have updates when there's something to update on.
Yes, point the other way is obviously if progress isn't being made, that's of interest to the committee as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
if I may, Chair, it comes back to that question that Councillor Taylor asked very early on about capacity. Yep. And the reality is that the capacity to review that a document of that size is limited. And I'm certainly not going to go and pester Debbie to say I need an additional post just to spend time looking at the Constitution. It's all about that balance.
Yeah, I guess the final update, Dave, is that you weren't on the email trail that Julie replied to at 1 PM today. We are discussing it and seeing what we can do to accelerate and tweak the way we're looking at things. But it's something that I've flagged internally as well. And I know that we had this process where we sort of had the working group, and we sort of had group leaders as part of that process, but the process wasn't constitutionalized and so on. So I think there's a little bit of taking a look at how we operate as well as the pace, but my opinion is that if we have 6 months between meetings, we won't get that much done, and that's the root cause for me.
Yeah. Okay. Are you otherwise happy? Yeah. Okay.
I think it's better that we do it well, and even if it takes longer than rush, because it's very important, the whole running of the organisation. So
You think we do it well?
I think we do, but I'm biased.
Okay, item 15 then is urgent business, which there isn't any. That's just to note because partway through the next item, we'll go into a private session. The next item is item 16, the internal audit progress report. And I guess, yes, just to note that we'll be on the white bit of the papers until we go into private session, at which point everybody can get the pink ones out. But until then, if you could keep them hidden so that whoever's in charge of the YouTube doesn't have to keep blurring things. Anyway.
Thank you, Chair. Conor Munro, Director of Internal Audit for Verito and the Council's outsourced Head of Internal Audit. So, as the committee is familiar with this report, actually, in a small apology to the committee, it does only prepare information up to mid-June, and unfortunately, time period of leave meant that I couldn't revisit before the rescheduled meeting. So I will try to give some further updates to the progress section of the report in terms of current ongoing work where I can. So the report updates the committee on the status of ongoing audits, our current delivery intentions over the remainder of the year, and outcomes from the follow-up of agreed actions. And on this occasion, it includes the outcomes from Verito's self-assessment against the global internal audit standards in the UK public sector. And that self-assessment had been unfinished at the time that we presented our annual report to the committee in May, and we said that we would bring this back to the committee so you had full sight of our quality assurance and improvement programme. So since the last report to the committee, 4 audits have been finalised, so that's up 1 from what's been reported on page 459 of your packs. The payroll audit has been concluded with reasonable assurance last week. The 2 other audits reported in draft are still in draft at the moment. We're just agreeing some of the finer details with officers, including one that has gone through as a revised draft through the DMT there. A number of audits are in progress, and that number is set to double very shortly because our Q2 allocations have been made to the team, so they'll be getting started on that work in due course. Across pages 460 and 461, we share the outcomes from the self-assessment that I just mentioned. So the key aspect to all that commentary really is the fact that we would consider ourselves to conform to our standards. So we took the assessment against CIPFA's conformance assessment toolkit, which was quite an onerous process. It's a very detailed document. There were about 90 or so assertions to be made, and quite confident and comfortable and pleased to report the overall position that we arrived at in that only 3 of those 91 assertions did we respond only partially conformed to the standards, and in an update to that should now only be 2 because the professional body has since withdrawn the topical requirements, which is the 3rd of the 3 there. In addition to the conformance actions, we've also got a further 24 improvement actions, and these are where minor amendments are needed to our processes or how we've documented our processes to better demonstrate conformance ahead of future external assessments, the next of which is scheduled for 2028. So progress made in implementing all of those actions that come from the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme will be presented in May next year when our annual report for 26-27 is prepared and shared with you. Just going through the appendices now very quickly. So Appendix A, as usual, details the opinions of the finalised audits and the progress of audits that are currently underway. Appendix B shows the current priorities for delivery of the remainder of the year. So anything in due now you should see also in Appendix A, but also those that are in due next. The majority of those that are in due next have been scheduled for the current quarter 2, and are getting underway. Appendix C, that provides a summary of the key issues from 3 of the now 4 audits that have been finalised since our last report to the committee, and skipping Appendix D into Appendix E. That reflects outcomes from the follow-up work we've undertaken over the last 12 months. So the headline really from that is around 80% of actions followed up in the period have been completed. What happens when they're not completed? Well, they tend to either be overdue, or they have revised dates agreed. So we have 13 actions where they've had their timescales revised and 10 where they are currently overdue. While the report does include overdue actions, we are still seeking a resolution with officers following our escalation process internally, and so none of those actions are being escalated to this committee at this point in time for a resolution from yourselves. So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the report. I'm happy to take any comments and questions on that section.
Well, thank you for that. And look, good news on the self-assessment. I suppose the question around that is, given it is marking your own homework, so to speak, is what's the kind of internal governance and assurance for Veritel then to make sure that that self-assessment is robust, does reflect the actual sort of compliance against those different components?
And so effectively it's in our interest to make that process as strong as possible, because we know that we have to prepare for external assessments. Yes, they do only come around every 5 years, but this next one is particularly important because the standards have changed. So we need to make sure we're absolutely sort of confident in our responses. The governance internally, so with me heading up the function, I would undertake the assessment, but then there's a peer review kind of challenge. So I would complete it. It's obviously guided by CITFA's own toolkit as well. So they're asking us all the questions and giving suggestions of what sort of evidence we should be providing to demonstrate conformance. So we try to be, as necessarily we should be, like quite harsh on ourselves. I think that's why we have 24 improvement actions, because I think you could make a case for us not needing to write those into our action plan, but we want to be especially confident that an external assessor could come in. So the challenge that I would get would be from my colleagues in the management team, saying, is that actually what happens? Are we confident that we could demonstrate that happens consistently? And if not, potentially conformance action, etc. So that's how it works internally. No problem.
That's better.
Could I just ask what sort of audit do you do on Blue Badge applications?
Yep, so it's a simple compliance with regulations. So the whole process of receiving the applications, reviewing them, undertaking any checks for validity and eligibility, any reassessments that are required after the period that's over 3 years, to ensure that that's all done correctly, that actual applications are logged and received and turned into cases, and timescales are met.
Okay, so that the applications are carried out in a timely manner.
Yep.
That would be part of it, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions on the public papers? Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, Appendix C, delicately not asking anything that's in the private papers. First one is on page 469, there's the flex time and annual leave. It says on the public papers, no opinion given. That isn't what it says on the private papers, but I didn't want to say what it says in the private papers if it's deliberate for some reason I don't understand.
Yes, that's an error in how the report has been drafted. So yeah, a good spot, and apologies for that. So yeah, we can say that there was a reasonable assurance opinion given for that audit.
Thanks. And I won't share what I can't share in public, but to request an action for you to validate in the management actions agreed, it mentions the FlexiSheet template will be reviewed. This will include ensuring the macros are accurate and work. My public opinion is that we shouldn't really be reliant on macros and templates and stuff, and that there is a need for further transformation work. Can you engage the team to see if that is a management action that can be agreed, please? Thank you.
Absolutely, yes, we can do that. In fact, we are doing some work on transformation program and savings delivery. Whether or not this level of item will be on there, I don't know, but we can certainly ask the question about whether or not that's been taken from this committee and this report into their consideration.
Thank you. And then Appendix E, thank you very much for bringing back the request from this committee for the from me to bring the breakdown. It is really, really useful to see actually, and it tells a really good story around, you know, most of the actions are completed. There are some actions that aren't yet due for follow-up, but they're still on time for the original timeframes. We've got the other charts on page 473 onwards that kind of spells out when things are delayed, or you know, they need to take longer, or whatever the right phrasing is, what that delay is like, and it's a broad range, and it's not just dependent on the significance, but there's nothing critical on the list of things that were delayed. And then the overdue, which is where they're not agreed to go on too long, but they have gone on too long. And that's interesting as well. I mean, I think the only thing to call out that's a negative on there is I don't think it should take more than 30 days to identify once an action's overdue what the new date is, or what the update is. And it says the process of following up the action and drawing conclusions is ongoing, which shouldn't take more than 30 days. But again, that's 3 out of whatever the number was on the other page, 116. And I think it shows that we are. It gives us some good assurance on our side that we are pretty good at this across the officer base. This isn't like one department. This is everything that's been agreed. And you know, the vast majority have been completed, and the others are on track, or when they move by a kind of known amount. They tend to be moved formally rather than just overdue. There's only 10 things overdue in totality, and most of those are, you know, 70% of those are within. They're not as long as you think they would be for overdue when we're looking at like multiple year actions. So yeah, just wanted to thank you for bringing that forward. There wasn't anything else really to ask about that. I just didn't think that I should not comment on it given the hard work that was put into it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. So I think if we finish the questions on the public parties report, we'll close the meeting at that point.